This is an overview of the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation is an independent federal agency. It was created by Congress in 1950 to promote the progress of science, to advance national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure national defense. It is a part of the executive branch of government, but unlike NIH, Department of Ed, or Department of Energy, it does not report up to a cabinet level position. And unlike other science agencies, NSF does not maintain its own research laboratories. And here we have an NSF organizational chart. So the NSF leadership has two major components. There's a director who oversees the NSF staff and management and are responsible for program creation, administration, merit review, planning, budget, and day-to-day operations. And then there is a 24-member National Science Board. And these individuals meet 6 times a year to establish the overall policies of the foundation. The director and all board members serve 6-year terms, with 1/3 of the board being appointed every 2 years. And then each of them, as well as the NSF deputy director, is appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. The board also serves as an independent body of advisors to both the President and Congress on policy matters related to science and engineering and education in science and engineering. NSF is divided into 8 directorates that support science and engineering research and education. And they are Biological Sciences, Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering, Directorate for STEM Education, Directorate for Engineering, Directorate for Geosciences, Directorate for Math and Physical Sciences, Directorate for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences, Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnership. And then we have 2 offices outside of those directorates. And then the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnership is actually fairly new over the last couple of years. It supports use-inspired and translational research, or looking at practical applications and potential uses for research in the STEM field. So the offices that interact with grantees are going to be the Division of Grants and Agreements. They are responsible for the award of the NSF grants and agreements that are recommended by the NSF program offices. And then from pre-award through closeout, they conduct a variety of business, financial, and award administrative reviews to ensure compliance with award terms and conditions, NSF policies and procedures, and federal rules and regulations. The one that we are probably more familiar with as research administrators is going to be the Policy Office. It is responsible for developing, implementing, and issuing proposal and award policy for NSF programs, reviewing and providing official clearance for NSF funding opportunities and related documents, and coordinating outreach programs for external stakeholders and NSF staff. The Office of the Inspector General is an independent and objective oversight authority. It reports directly to the National Science Board and Congress, and their mission is to provide independent oversight of NSF to improve the effectiveness, efficiency, and economy of its programs and operations, and then to prevent and detect fraud, waste, and abuse. Okay, so this is the NSF PAPPG. It's a proposal and award policies and procedures guide. It is a document that I keep pulled up at all times anytime I'm working with NSF. It is composed of 2 different parts. Part 1 sets forth the proposal preparation and submission guidelines and provides guidance for the preparation and submission of the proposals. And then Part 2 sets forth the policies and procedures regarding the award administration and monitoring of the grants and cooperative agreements. It is generally updated once a year. The most recent version is the NSF 24-1. They have not submitted a newer version at this time. They generally send it out for comments, and then they will publish after they have a review period for comments, but that has not been done yet. This is the most recent version. So we have several categories of proposers. Institutions of higher education is going to be your 2 or 4-year universities, including community colleges. They have to be accredited in and have a campus located in the United States. And when faculty members are applying, they're applying on behalf of themselves, but the institution is the actual applicant. We also have nonprofit and non-academic organizations. This is going to be things like your museums, observatories, research laboratories, professional societies, things like that. Then we have for-profit organizations. This is going to be your commercial organizations, especially small businesses. They have some specific solicitations for small businesses where they partner with institutions. And then you're also going to have state and local governments. This is going to be your state educational offices or organizations and local school districts. The local school districts can submit proposals intended to broaden the impact, accelerate the pace, and increase the effectiveness of improvements in science, math, and engineering education in both K through 12 and post-secondary levels. Then we have our categories of proposers that are not necessarily eligible. Unaffiliated individuals are not going to be eligible unless they are specifically authorized in an NSF solicitation, like a postdoc fellowship program. They cannot receive direct funding support from NSF unless that is spelled out in our solicitation. Foreign organizations are rarely provided funding from NSF. They will consider them sometimes for proposals for cooperative projects involving U.S. organizations, but it is not a guarantee. And then other federal agencies, NSF does not typically fund other federal agencies, so you're not going to see like NASA or any of these other sponsors listed as an applicant to NSF. And then not eligible to submit proposals. So individuals who are a current party to a malign foreign talent recruitment program are not eligible to serve as senior or key personnel in an NSF proposal or any NSF award made after May 20th, 2024. These programs are programs that positions or activities sponsored by a country of concern, such as China, Iran, North Korea, or Russia, or certain academic institutions. So this law was established by the Chips and Sciences Act of 2022. I know whenever I was reviewing questions for the CRA, there was a lot that had the names of the laws and the acts. So I would keep that in mind. It's the Chips and Science Act of 2022. Senior key personnel must also certify prior to proposal submission and annually for the duration of the award that they do not fall under this category. And those certifications are made and signed CV on the BioSketch and current pending support. So now let's get to what does NSF fund? So they fund research proposals, equipment proposals, conference and workshop proposals, travel proposals, and joint solicitations with other agencies. So there's a few different mechanisms that they can communicate funding opportunities. They have program descriptions, which are very broad and general, and most of the time give very little information. They usually have a due date or say it's an open window and they refer you to the PAPPG, and it's just under that particular program description on the NSF website. And usually when you're applying to that in research.gov, it's going to start with PD and then 2 numbers dash a couple of other numbers. Program announcements are more formal NSF publications that announce the programs, and they again utilize the generic eligibility and proposal preparation that is found in the PAPPG. Program solicitations is going to be what we see more often. This is going to be our the normal solicitation that we're used to seeing that gives a funding estimated amount or a hard number, who is eligible. It's also going to give if they want certain documents that maybe are not included just in the general PAPPG guidelines. So it's going to be anything that differs a little bit from the PAPPG. And then dear colleague letters they usually are announcing that to the proposer community about an upcoming opportunity, and sometimes they are announcing supplemental funds that you can add to existing awards. So those are not quite as formal. Okay, the prospect tool is something that PIs could use to submit their concept notes to program officers. It was a separate login to go via login.gov. However, this was decommissioned as of May of 2025. I did want to still include it because there could still be some questions on the CRA exam. When they used this form, it was directly routed to the relevant program staff, and then they would tell them if they were allowed to move forward with that concept note. Now the recommendation is just for the PI to submit a concept note to the program officer listed for that specific program. So for types of submissions, we have letters of intent, and these are non-binding. It's a non-binding document that helps the NSF staff gauge the size and range of the competition. It really helps them kind of get an idea for the reviewers that they may need. And the information is also used to help avoid potential conflicts of interest during the review process. And sometimes they can be, it can say that they're recommended, or it can say required. Our next type of submission is going to be a preliminary proposal. So this is not for every submission. It will vary if they request this. This is a little bit more in depth than an LOI. Usually it's 2 to 5 pages of a smaller version of a project description, and they really, it can increase the overall quality of the full submission, and then it also assists the NSF staff in gauging what they would be looking at for the full review. And they can use 2 different types of decisions for this. They can use an invite, not invite decision, and that is if you're not invited, it means you're not eligible to submit a full proposal. And or they can use an encourage discourage decision, where they can discourage you and say, hey, it might not be worth your time to do this, it's not really what we're looking for, but you are still eligible to submit. So it will say in the guidelines what mechanism they're going to use for decision making most of the time. So for full proposals, they are much more in depth, much more time consuming. They want the entire proposal to show the objectives and scientific, engineering, or educational significance, the sustainability, the qualifications of the investigator and any co-investigators, and the organization itself to manage funds, and then the effect of the activity on the infrastructure of science, engineering, and education, and the amount of funding required. And full proposals should always present the intellectual merit and broader impacts of the proposed project. So when to submit proposals? So deadlines are 5 p.m. submitters local time, and it's tied to the local time of the organization, not the location of the PI. So even if we have a PI that is tied to us here at Texas A&M and College Station, but they are not here and they are off doing some project in Antarctica, they are tied to our 5 p.m. Central Standard Time deadline. Target dates, sometimes there'll just be a date that they suggest as a target date, and that's so that it will go through that review cycle, but you can still submit outside of that. If it says deadline date, that is a hard deadline, and the system won't even allow you to submit after 5 p.m. your local time after the deadline date. Submission windows gives you a window that you can start submissions. So it may say February 1st through June 30th. But that June 30th date, the close of the submission window, also acts as a deadline date. You cannot submit after the end of that. There are special exceptions to NSF's deadline dates. However, you have to work with a program officer, notify them. This is usually in the event of a natural disaster, or if the NSF offices are closed due to inclement weather or other reasons that interfere with an organization's ability to meet the proposal submission deadline. There's a checkbox on the cover page that you have to check, and then you also have to upload a document in supplementary, I think it's supplementary or additional copy documents, and the NSF program officer has to notify you back in writing that they're going to accept it. I know when Hurricane Harvey happened, I generally work with the A&M Corpus Christi folks. So all of them were definitely granted an exception to deadline dates, but that didn't necessarily mean that the people here in College Station were. So the electronic submission of proposals is going to go either through research.gov or grants.gov. 90% of the proposals are submitted through research.gov. I know our office uses research.gov. I really like it. It's very intuitive, and it gives you a lot of, it won't even allow you to upload certain documents if they're not in compliance. So those are the 2 mechanisms that you're able to use. So if someone is a former NSF staff, for 1 year, they have to have a substitute negotiator be the submitter or proposer. And they have to name that person as a substitute negotiator. They have to be from the same organization, and they have to have the information submitted under additional single copy documents. And then we have several sections of a full proposal. So we have single copy documents. We have our cover page, which is automatically generated from the system. Project summary, table of contents is automatically generated, project description, references cited, facilities, equipment, and other resources, our budget and budget justification, all of our senior personnel documents, and any special information and supplementary documentation that is required per the RFP. So for the single copy documents, these are for NSF use only. They, if you have an authorization to deviate from the NSF proposal preparation requirements, so deadline extension, if you want to do the list of suggested reviewers or reviewers not to include any proprietary information, proposal certifications, and any information from your collaborators that you wanted to include in this area, that's where these would be uploaded. I have sat through several trainings with people from NSF who say that your PIs are doing themselves a disservice if they do not include a list of suggested reviewers. So our project summary, and this can be no more than 1 page in length. It has to include an overview, intellectual merit section, and broader impact section. And each one of those sections have to be on their own line, or the research.gov system doesn't even allow you to upload. And you cannot submit if this is not there. It will give you an error that will not even allow submission. Our project description, it's generally going to be 15 pages. I have seen RFPs where it varies. It can be 18 pages. It can be 10 pages. But this is where the PI is going to put a detailed description of the project's overall purpose. They have to address what they want to do, why they want to do it, how they're going to do it, what measures that will tell them if they're succeeding, and what benefits could accrue for the community, the science community. There has to be a results from prior NSF support section that has to include the award number and end date, and this is only for the past 5 years. Any current funding, including no cost extensions. There's very specific information that has to be included in that, but there has to be a results from prior NSF support section. And there also has to be a section labeled broader impacts. So references is a section that is also required. It is a separate upload. You have to include all authors. If the reference is available electronically, you need to include the URL. You follow an accepted scholarly format, and do not include any commentary parenthetical to the narrative. It can be seen as circumventing a page limit. There is no page limit on the references. Facilities, equipment, and other resources is used to assess the adequacy of the resources available. So proposers should include a detailed description of internal and external resources, physical and personnel, for the organization, its collaborators, subawardees. It should be narrative in nature. It should not be bullet pointed. It should not just be a list. And it should not include any quantifiable financial information. And these resources in the facilities are not considered voluntary committed cost sharing. So our budget and budget justification, the budget has to be entered, has to be keyed in for each year, and then the system will automatically generate the cumulative budget from that. Inclusion of voluntary committed cost sharing is prohibited by NSF. If there's mandatory cost sharing, that is shown on a line in the budget, and there's a section in the budget justification because they want the budget justification to follow the way that the budget is entered. So you want your sections to be the same as their budget template. The budget justification is limited to 5 pages per organization. So if you have subs, you get 5 pages, they get 5 pages. But it should detail the rates of pay for the individuals, for all senior personnel and any other professionals. We want you to include the number of person months, a rate of pay, so whether that's based on the monthly pay or annual pay. And then as a general policy, NSF limits the salary compensation requested in a proposal budget to no more than 2 person months per year. But that's for all NSF funding. So that's not just for the one proposal you may be working on, that's for all NSF funding. So I always tell my PIs to keep that in mind if they like to submit to NSF often. That has to be for all NSF funding. And then, like I said, each subaward organization can also have a 5-page budget justification, and their budget must be keyed in as well. So participant support refers to the direct costs for items such as stipends, subsistence, travel, or any registration fees paid on behalf of participants or trainees. Participants cannot be employees, and any payments to human subjects are not participant support. So that would be like a participant incentive, not a participant support. And they would go under other direct costs. Speakers and trainers are not generally participant support because they're not participants, paying for them to come and perform a service for the participants, but that is still another direct cost. And you cannot budget the cost of having a room to hold your conference or your workshop in, any catering costs, etc., for holding something for participants under participant support. That is another direct cost as well. Cost share. So we have voluntary, committed, and uncommitted cost sharing. So voluntary committed cost sharing means that cost sharing is specifically pledged on a voluntary basis in the budget, or if you do put a financial amount under your facilities, that could be considered voluntary cost sharing if you are quantifying it. Inclusion of voluntary committed cost sharing is prohibited by NSF. There are some RFPs that require mandatory cost sharing, and that is only when it is explicitly authorized by the NSF director, the NSB, or legislation, and it is shown on line M of the budget. Organizational resources are described in the facilities, equipment, and other resources. Grantee may, at its own discretion, contribute voluntary uncommitted cost sharing. Biographical sketches for NSF have to be created in Science CV, so that is a PI portal. The biographical section of the PAPPG has been revised. They removed the 3-page limit, so there's not a page limit for the biographical sketch anymore. The synergistic activities was also removed from the biographical sketch. It is now its own upload, and there are several sections in Science CV on the biographical sketch, and it'll the PI fills out the information and it will create the file. They have professional preparation, appointments, a list of the 5 products most closely related to the proposed project, and then up to 5 other significant products, whether or not it's related to the proposed project. The current and pending support file is also created in Science CV, and it must include information on all current pending support for ongoing projects and proposals, including the current proposal you're working on. It has to include an overall objective. It has to summarize any potential overlap with active or pending proposals. And it has to include the total award amount as well as the number of person months per year to be devoted to the project. The current project support from whatever source, including internal funds allocated towards specific projects, must be listed. And all other projects of time of the PI and any of their senior personnel must be included, even if they receive no salary support. However, a couple of things that are excluded are any of your startup funding. That does not have to be included. You have to disclose all in-kind contributions with an estimated dollar value of $5,000 or more, and that require a commitment of the individual's time. An in-kind contribution is non-cash contribution provided by an external entity. So this could be lab space, real property, data or data sets, supplies, and any other expendable property, goods and services, employee or student resources. Anything that has an estimated value of less than $5,000 does not need to be reported. The collaborators and other affiliations information document is an Excel file that is uploaded in the research.gov portal. It is used to manage reviewer selection, and it has to be provided for each senior personnel. And there are 5 tables. The first table is the senior personnel's name and organizational affiliation in the last 12 months. And then your next table, you list names who you have a personal, family, or business relationship with that would preclude their service as a reviewer. The next table is your PhD advisors and all of the PhD thesis advisees. And then your 4th table is your co-authors and collaborators. And your 5th table is your editorial board, editor-in-chief, and co-editors of journals over the last 24 months. The synergistic activities is now its own upload. It has been removed from the BioSketch. It must be submitted by any individual that is designated as senior key personnel for the proposal, and it's a separate upload for each person. There's not a template or a format. I always ask my PIs to make sure that they put their name on there because the system does not generate their name on the document because it's literally just uploaded. So it can be one page and can include up to 5 distinct examples that demonstrate broader impact of the individual's professional and scholarly activities. Cannot be more than one page, and each example should be distinct. So each proposal also must include a data management plan. All data plans are limited to no more than 2 pages. And in this, they have to include the types of data, the standards to be used for data in metadata format and content, policies for accessing and sharing data for any appropriate protection of privacy, confidentiality, security, etc., policies and provisions for reusing and redistributing the data, and any plans for archiving the data. All of that should be included in the 2-page plan. The mentoring plan. NSF grant applications are required to include a mentoring plan for postdocs and grad students. It is limited to 1 page. And if you are the lead entity, whether you're submitting as with subrecipients or collaborative from multiple, even if you didn't budget for grad students or postdoctoral fellows, if anyone else did in your project, you have to have this plan and it has to be uploaded. And then examples of mentoring activities include career counseling, training in preparation of grant proposals, training in publications or presentations, and guidance on ways to improve teaching and mentoring skills, guidance on how to effectively collaborate with researchers from different backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds and disciplinary areas, and training in responsible professional practices. And again, that is limited to 1 page. So this is not at the proposal stage. I think it's through the life of the grant. Individual development plans for postdocs or grad students have to be included. If they receive substantial NSF support, they must have an individual development plan. They define substantial report if they have received 1 person month or more during the annual reporting period. And the plan maps out educational goals, career exploration, and professional development. And certification that each grad student or postdoctoral scholar has a plan is completed by the PI or co-PI in research.gov as a part of their annual reporting process. So this is after the proposal is awarded and you're doing that annual reporting. Additional documentation that can be required if there's any special info or supplementary documentation needed, such as if you're performing part of the project off campus or in foreign countries, if you're documenting any collaborative arrangements, if there's any environmental impacts, that information would be included here. Letters of collaboration are limited to stating the intent to collaborate. So there is a 2 to 3 sentence blurb in the PAPPG. They say that it is only the recommended text. However, I always tell my PIs, even though they're only saying recommended, I would highly recommend it. It's a PI call, but you are assuming the risk of it getting returned without review if you don't use their verbiage, just because people tend to make letters of collaboration into letters of support if we're not using that verbiage. Letters of support are only allowed if it is specifically required by the solicitation. And then it will give, in that specific solicitation will give you a page limit. Usually it's 2 pages. And then the appendix can only be included if there's a deviation from the guidelines that has been requested. So we have some optional sections. Our other personnel biographical information. This would be if you were uploading a CV for a postdoc, other professional or student, and it should include the information on exceptional qualifications that make them want to consider this as part of the merit of the proposal. Other supplementary documents, if those are requested in the specific funding solicitation, and you can upload multiple files. So you don't have to have just 1 PDF file of all of the documents. If it's several letters, several whatever, you can upload them separately. List of suggested reviewers and list of reviewers not to include. Like I said, NSF has said that your PIs are doing themselves a disservice if they do not include a list of suggested reviewers. I just always tell my PIs and then leave it up to them. Deviation authorization may be included only if it's deviating from the guidelines and the request has been authorized by NSF. And then additional single copy documents are not seen by the reviewers. So this is something such as a AOR designation of a substitute negotiator. So seeking and obtaining tribal nation approval for proposals that may impact tribal resources or interests. I always tell my PIs that if this applies to them, that it is best to get on it really soon. It takes a really long time from my experience, but any proposals that may impact the resources or interest of a federally recognized American Indian or Alaskan Native tribal nation will not be awarded without prior written approval from the designated officials of the tribal nation. You have to check the box on the cover sheet. And you have to include in the supplementary documents at least one of the following. It has to either be a copy of the written request to the relevant tribal nation to carry out proposed activities, a written confirmation from the tribal nation that review and approve, or a copy of a document from the relevant tribal nation that provides the requisite approval. The safe and inclusive working environments for off-campus or off-site research. So each proposal that proposes to conduct off-campus or off-site research, the AOR has to complete a certification. It's a checkbox in research.gov, and you have to complete the certification. There's a plan in place for that proposal, and the plan has to describe how the following types of behavior would be addressed. So any abuse of a person, not limited to harassment, stalking, bullying, hazing. And it doesn't matter whether the behavior is carried out verbally, physically, electronically, or in written form, and any conduct that is unwelcome, offensive, indecent, obscene, or disorderly. So those plans have to be available. They don't necessarily have to be submitted unless a specific RFP asks for it. A conference proposal. These are only supported if equivalent results cannot be attained by attendance at a regular meeting of a professional society, and they are required to have a policy or code of conduct that addresses sexual harassment, any other forms of harassment, and it must be disseminated to the conference participants prior to attendance at the conference and made available at the conference itself. It does not have to be submitted to the policy or code of conduct does not have to be submitted to NSF for review. Separate collaborative proposals. So if your PI is wanting to submit this, it has to be done in research.gov. It cannot be completed in grants.gov. And this is a format in which two or more institutions are linked together in research.gov with one lead organization. Research.gov actually, once you select that it's a collaborative proposal, they will automatically put collaborative research in the title. Each institution is awarded funds separately from NSF, so you don't have to wait for the main award and then for your sub-award office to get those sub-award contracts out, but you're still working together on the project. The lead organization will link proposals from the collaborative institutions by using the temporary proposal number, and then all components of the collaborative proposal have to meet all of the criteria, and failure to do so could make the proposal be returned without review. If your PI doesn't want to go this route, there's the single proposal method where you have a lead institution with subcontracts to collaborators. If you are submitting separate collaborative proposals, this is the list of documents. So the lead organization is responsible for all of the documents on the left, whereas the non-lead organization is only responsible for the documents that specifically apply to their institution. But generally the PIs are still working together to get, the project description and everything, but it's only uploaded under the lead organization. So now we're going to go over some different types of proposals that are not just your typical standard research proposals with a due date. So there's the rapid response research proposals. These require program manager approval. The budget is consistent with the project scope and activities. It's up to $200,000 for 1 year. And the project description is 5 pages and it begins with the title Rapid. These types of proposals were submitted in response to like Hurricane Harvey and COVID, I believe. Then there's the eager submissions. These are used to support exploratory work in its early stages, but that's untested. They're considered high risk, high payoff in the sense that it involves different approaches, applies new expertise. The program officer must give approval for submission. The project description is limited to 8 pages. and the budget is limited to $300,000 and a 2-year duration. And these are only reviewed internally and can have optional external input. The RAISE proposals are used to support bold interdisciplinary projects. So these can be for up to $1 million and 5 years in duration. It is contingent on 2 program officers' approvals to be able to submit. And the scientific advances require multiple disciplinaries to work together and promises transformational advances and prospective discoveries by crossing those disciplinary boundaries that would not be recognized through traditional review or co-review. The goalie proposals, these seek to stimulate collaboration between academic research institutions and industry. The program officer has to be contacted prior to submission. One industrial co-PI must be listed on the cover sheet. However, the industrial participant cannot use or receive any NSF funds. The one caveat is if there is a small business that is not already funded through an SBI or STTR. And the academic and industry partners for this should agree in advance as to how the intellectual property rights will be handled. The Ideas Lab proposal. So this supports development and implementation of creative and innovative project ideas. They use a 4-stage process. So you have your selection of panelists. The role of the selection panel is to provide advice on the selection of their participants. And the role of the Ideas Lab panel is to provide an assessment of the project ideas developed during the Ideas Lab. Then there's the selection of the participants. This is a call for participant solicitation. Describes the specific focus that the Idea Labs will be of the Idea Labs, and it will be issued. The solicitation will specify the content and submission instructions for applications, and the project description is limited to 2 pages and should include information about the applicant's specific expertise and interest in the topic area. And then the applicants are notified electronically of NSF's decision on whether they are invited to participate in the Ideas Lab. And then stage 3 is there's a subset of participants that are selected from the submitted applications by NSF, and they're brought together for an intensive, interactive, and free-thinking environment where participants immerse themselves in a collaborative dialogue to construct bold and innovative approaches. And then at the end of the Ideas Lab, the Idea Lab panel will provide a consensus report summarizing their evaluation of each project idea. And then there's a review and recommendation of full proposals where they're sent out invitations. The facilitation awards for scientists and engineers with disability, called phased. So this is to help reduce or remove barriers to participation in research and training by people with physical disabilities by providing special equipment assistance under awards made by NSF. And they encourage persons with disabilities to pursue careers in science and engineering by stimulating the development and demonstration of special equipment that facilitates their work. There's the research opportunity supplemental funding, request for primarily undergraduate institutions. This enables faculty members to pursue research as part of a collaborative research team by being a visiting scientist at another NSF-supported institution, and either the visitor's home organization or the host organization or both have to be an eligible primarily undergraduate institution of higher education, and it's intended to increase or maintain the primarily undergrad institution faculty members' research capability and effectiveness. A formal request has to be made by the host institution of the NSF-supported PI who wishes to host that faculty member. The NSF grad research fellowships are 5-year awards. 3 years are financial support. The grad researcher gets a stipend. They get an educational allowance to their institution. They've funded NSF has funded over 60,000 grad research fellowships out of more than 500,000 applicants. And eligibility is limited to U.S. citizens, nationals, and permanent residents. NSF, for their non-award decisions, there's a few different types. So there's withdrawal. This can be done anytime prior to a funding recommendation. The PI or the Sponsored Projects Office would initiate this in research.gov. A proposal not accepted or returned without review. This would mean that it did not meet some or any of the guidelines. So whether it's fonts, whether you didn't include a section, even if it is the margins, I have had that happen, that they can return the proposal without review. If there's a declination, the PI and anyone who has an AOR role in research.gov will get an email saying that the proposal was declined, and it will give an explanation for reasons. And if the PI is not satisfied with the declination, they can request reconsideration, and they can resubmit only after it has undergone substantial revision. So NSF's Division of Grants and Agreements reviews the recommendations from the program office for any business, financial, and policy implications, and they make the official award. And they will make the official award as long as the institution has an adequate grants management capacity. The PIs do not have any overdue annual or final reports, and there are no other outstanding issues with the institution or PI. So there are a couple different kinds of awards. There's a standard grant, and in the standard grant, NSF agrees to provide a specific level of support, so a certain amount of money for a certain period of time, and they do not have a statement that they intend to provide additional future support without submission of another proposal. Usually it's a 3 to 5 year award period for those standard grants. A continuing grant, so NSF agrees to provide a specific dollar amount of support for an initial specified period of time, usually it's the first year, with the statement that they plan to provide additional support for additional years as long as funds are available and the results are achieved. And then there's supplemental. So sometimes NSF will say that they have small amounts of supplemental funding and provide up to 6 months of additional support to assure adequate completion of their original scope of work. Grantees are free to accept or reject the grant as awarded. NSF transmits those award notices to the organizations the same way they do the declination notices. So it'll go to the PI as well as anyone else who has that AOR role. And normally a request to draw down funds constitutes acceptance. However, sometimes NSF may require formal acceptance of a grant. So when they send out the award, it consists of the award notice, including any special conditions, general federal award information that is required by CFR 200, the budget, including the amount by categories of expenses, any general conditions referenced in the award notice, the proposal that was submitted, and the program announcement that the proposal was submitted in response to. The grantee responsibilities. The grantee has full responsibility for conduct of the project or activity supported under an NSF grant and for the results achieved. Expenditures need to be allowable, necessary, and reasonable for the conduct of the project, and the proposed action has to be consistent with grant terms and conditions, consistent with NSF and grantee policies, and represents effective utilization of resources and does not constitute changes in objectives or scope. There may be some notifications to NSF that grantees can initiate and request for NSF approval. So examples of these are no cost extension, any changes in the objective or scope, you have to send that to NSF for approval. Any changes in your PI, co-PI, or your person months devoted to the project have to be sent. So there's all kinds of examples here of what would constitute changes in PI or co-PI or why that might happen. Or if you plan on subawarding, transferring, or contracting out part of an NSF award that maybe was not done at the proposal stage you didn't anticipate, that has to have NSF approval as well. Sometimes you'll have a PI transfer. And so when a PI decides to transfer institutions, you have a couple different options with an award. They can opt to nominate a substitute PI. They can request that the grant be terminated and closed out, or they can facilitate a transfer of the grant to the new organization. So in that case, the old organization has to submit a relinquishing statement. They have to make sure all their costs are closed out and all of that. And then the new institution is provided with the amount that they have to show a budget for. The PI has to provide a summary of the progress and a description of the work to be done. And then the new organization will help the PI submit all of that information through research.gov.